1, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Trabajadores del campo. La señora Lupe vende empanadas en la esquina de mi casa. Todas las mañanas está ahí, al lado de su cesta. Siempre dice lo mismo. ¡Empanadas! ¡Empanadas! Como si cantara. Antes trabajaba como jornalera. Nos dijo un día que mi papá le preguntó, pero se vino porque allá es muy difícil y ella ya tiene su edad. Lo veo en sus manos cada vez que le compramos.
Andrei, ¿nos escuchas?
Hola, Fernando, buenos días. Sí, se escucha.
Vale, déjalo aquí por acá.
1, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonita seguro consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Para seguridad social.
Migrantes. Nosotros no somos de aquí, llegamos caminando de muy lejos, pero eso fue cuando yo todavía era una niña. Los domingos vendemos fruta en el mercado. Cuando no hay mucha gente, mi mamá atiende a mi hermano que llora y pide comida a cada rato. Yo ayudo a pesar y a dar el vuelto. La gente casi siempre me sonríe.
1, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonita seguro consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Para seguridad social.
Migrantes. Nosotros no somos de aquí, llegamos caminando de muy lejos, pero eso fue cuando yo todavía era una niña. Los domingos vendemos fruta en el mercado. Cuando no hay mucha gente, mi mamá atiende a mi hermano que llora y pide comida a cada rato. Yo ayudo a pesar y a dar el vuelto. La gente casi siempre me sonríe.
Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de invalidez. El abuelo de Sofía siempre habla como si estuviera gritando. Sofía dice que ya no escucha, porque cuando estaba joven trabajaba en una fábrica donde había mucho ruido. Desde hace tiempo está incapacitado, pero igual está ocupado todo el tiempo reparando cosas que la gente le lleva. Es como si tuviera magia en las manos.
2, 3 vaya seguridad social.
Prestaciones por maternidad. Por la ventana veo llegar a la señora Regina. Camina despacio y a veces se agarra de las paredes. Tiene una panza enorme porque está a punto de tener un bebé. A veces yo la ayudo con las bolsas y ella me agradece con la mirada. Hace días que no va al trabajo. Tiene licencia de maternidad y cuida a su bebé, que es lo más importante ahora.
Seguridad social.
Prestaciones de sobrevivientes. La abuela Carmen viene todas las tardes a cuidarnos mientras mamá trabaja. A nosotros nos gusta porque nos cuenta historias de cuando era pequeña. Desde que el abuelo murió, ella recibe una pensión. Por eso puede estar con nosotros y consentirnos. Además de historias, de vez en cuando nos trae dulces y cosas ricas para merendar.
Seguridad social.
Prestaciones en caso de accidente de trabajo y de enfermedad profesional. El celular sonó justo a la hora del almuerzo. Llamaron para decir que mi papá había sufrido un accidente en el trabajo. Aún recuerdo ese día. Todos estábamos asustados porque nos imaginamos muchas cosas. Ahora, cada vez que lo veo sentado en la sala con la mirada perdida, siento que está triste. No sé si porque le toca guardar reposo o porque debe esperar mucho tiempo para empezar a caminar de nuevo.
Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones familiares. En mi barrio hay muchas familias grandes, como la mía. Somos 4 hermanos y viene un bebé en camino. Mi papá dice que donde comen 2, comen 3 y donde comen 6, comen 7, porque estamos esperando que el bebé nazca pronto. Por fortuna, ahora va a recibir una ayuda para los gastos que se avecinan. Como dicen, tener un hijo es tener una bendición.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenos días a todas las personas que nos acompañan aquí en sala en este segundo día de actividades.
Thank you for being with us in the second day of the Inter-American Conference for Social Security 2024. We are about to start, and today we are going to have Dean Rodrigo Arias Camacho from the National University for Remote Studies in Costa Rica. He has the floor, so he is going to give us some message. Good morning. My regards to all the participants in today's activities. Now that we are celebrating the week of Social Security. Regards from the remote university in Costa Rica. Regards to all the people and participants in these activities that address different issues regarding modern societies. We cannot design current societies without considering development and contributions that different parts of Social Security have contributed in order to reach the current status for co-living together in all the countries. That's why it's so important to spend some time to share experiences and concerns before the challenges and the developments that every country have regarding social security. Not only in access to health, but also in well-being conditions that are indispensable so every individual can have a comprehensive development as human being and accomplish a good living status during his life. So that's why it's so important to share our experiences, our concerns, our expectations during these days around Social Security matters. On behalf of UNEC and CISS specifically, we are proud to be part of this event and to share with you the different results of several research that we have carried out with different populations. And hopefully all the expectations of the organization for this conference are going to be fulfilled. Regards from Costa Rica. Thank you so much, Dean. And I am the technical and legal assistance from the CISS. Maria Teresa González. Brando Pérez González is with me. Oscar Durian Guzman, Under-Director of Liaison and Memberships Attention. And different representatives of the CISS membership are here with us. Dr. Monsalve from the Colombian University. Dr. Rubén Moya from Bolivia. Dr. Pedro Alcántara from the National Council of Social Security in Dominican Republic. We all send you our regards. Good morning to all the participants that are with us here and remotely. Specifically, I would like to send my regards to all the academic staff. It's a great honor for us to have you here inaugurating this conference, and I would like to send my regards on behalf of the chair of this conference, Mr. Acedo Agurto, who is also director of Social Security Institute, and from our general director, Álvaro Velarca Hernández. For CISS, Social Security is a phenomenon that should be addressed by multiple sectors. And based in this bylaws of our conference, we have opened this to higher studies. So it is great to listen to you in the next 4 days to identify priorities that academia has regarding social security matters. And personally, I would like to share to all the participants that UNEC is the most recent membership. After several months, we have designed our route for collaboration, and they are going to take part in this week, and we are going to collaborate with them in the first Health Congress on Security in Workplace that is going to be carried out 7 and 8 of May 2024 to analyze trends and challenge of work risk together with the Inter-American Conference to Prevent Risk in the Workplace. It is an honor to broadcast all these conference that had to do with child, youth, and old age in order to accomplish social peace in Costa Rica. We wish you the best of success in your activities, and you know that CISS is going to echo all your activities in this continent. Pura vida, and thank you all. Thank you so much, Dean and Advisor. Let's start with the first panel for Social Security research. But before that, let me remind you that all the discussions are going to be available both in English and in Spanish. There is an interpretation component that you can have access to. This is a reminder to participants via Zoom. If they have an 80% of assistance, they will receive a certificate of participation. In the YouTube channel from CISS, you can follow up all the activities that we are celebrating to carry out the Week for Social Security services. The membership from other academias are going to share their studies and research. We are going to have the presentation from Costa Rica, Challenges for Social Security Matters. Andres Badilla from the remote university is going to give us a presentation, and we would like to thank you for that. The characterization of the social economic matters that are part of the Costa Rican challenge are very important. Costa Rica has a political stability and is facing a series of complexities that reflects trends and dilemmas that are present in all the region. Exploring these challenges will allow us to understand the specific situation of Costa Rica and is going to give us an opportunity to analyze common patterns and differences in this continent. Analyzing difficulties that Costa Rica is facing is going to give us lessons and perspectives to strengthen the Latin American cooperation in order to have balance and equitative balance in the social security matters. Andrea Solano, he is a researcher and a teacher in the Center of Investigation of Intercultura in the remote university since 2009. He has published different papers related with the system for social security in the academia and in the scientific environment in Costa Rica and in other parts of the world. He has been a lecturer in different conferences, in different means with activities for public debate. Currently, he is the coordinator of research characterizing cost of medications in Costa Rica, MBA by Political Science by the University of Costa Rica, a master's degree in Latin American Studies emphasizing development and culture, and he was appointed magna cum laude by this university. Currently, he is a PhD student of social studies by the UNED in Spain. André, you have the floor. Thank you. Good morning. It is a pleasure for me to send my regards from Costa Rica. I would like to thank you for having for the opportunity to share with you these studies that we have been carried out since 10 years ago in this university and that are related with social security aspects. I have a, a short dissertation with me that I am going to share with you, and it's about current challenges for Social Security in Costa Rica. Can you see my screen? Yes. Thank you so much. When we talk about the current challenges in Social Security, we are not only talking about challenges, but opportunities as well. This is the table of content from this research. First, I would like to give you some guidelines about the contributive system that was designed for a finance sustainability. We have several challenges. Of course, there are more, but because we have to give you a summary, I focus on the ones that I think are the two main challenges in Costa Rica. First, the labor market, and secondly, the state debt. And then I would like to share with you some ideas that I think are going to be the greatest challenge of Social Security, not only in my country, but at a regional level that are related with migration and climate change. And I am going to talk also about some ideas that are part of the research in Costa Rica. And to wrap up, I'm going to give you a general conclusion. So without further ado, let me tell you why I decided to design the architecture for this contributed system in Costa Rica. As you can see in this slide, let me see if I can give you a better view with a PDF.
Sí, un momentito nada más. Sí, disculpen un momento, ya estoy con ustedes.
Just a moment, please.
Ahora sí, voy a empezar a compartir nuevamente.
Once again, I am going to share my screen. I think this is better. As I was telling you, I would like to start by talking about the contributed system in Costa Rica that currently is based on the three-part contribution system that receives contributions from three main sectors: the labor, the workers, and the employers and the SNAP. If we analyze state contribution, we realize that state contribution is also a three-party contribution. Contribution is three parties when the state is in Costa Rica has to carry out also different concepts. They have to contribute as a state, and they have to contribute to Social Security for those populations that have that receive money from the state. That special population are children and youth and inmates, and the state is also an employer. So in that sense, the state should have enough resources to face the responsibility, all the contributions that they need to pay for Social Security.
Sorry, I don't know if you can see the slide, but what determines if the state has or not enough resources to face this social security situation? Well, it depends on the national budget, and the national budget depends on taxing, of course, but also on the job market. Both workers and employers depend on the degree of formalization they have on the job market. So, to cap things up, the Costa Rican state receives a contribution from the tripartite model. However, the state itself must perform a tripartite contribution as state, as employer, and for those who are insured by the state. So it is dependent on a strong budget that allows for this type of contribution. At the same time, workers and employers are dependent on the formalization level of the job market in Costa Rica. However, there's a series of indicators that seem to indicate that there's a weakening of the job market in Costa Rica, which generates pressure for Social Security. So, as a starting point, I provide you five large challenges, which I believe are the largest related to Social Security. First and foremost, it has to do with the Costa Rican job market. I consider that the job market is the first challenge because the job market is the first way of Social Security. Sometimes we forget that Social Security has several pillars, and the first of them is the job market. Then we have the pensions and retirement system, then the health system and education, and then we have the national policies for healthcare and care overall. So in Costa Rica, to have ordinary health services by the trust of the health ministry, you need to have a formal job. You need to be economically active, formally speaking. So despite the Costa Rican system aims to be universal in its service rendition, in practice, there are different populations that are excluded from the ordinary access to healthcare. They have access to emergency healthcare. Everyone does. But if you do not contribute to Social Security, then you are charged correspondingly. However, there are other conditions regarding the formal job market that are forms of exclusion to those populations to ordinary healthcare. As I mentioned, the degree of formalization is really important to have access to Social Security. So if I'm unemployed, or if I work informally, or if I'm a migrant with irregular condition, then those type of persons don't have access to healthcare, and when they have non-emergencies, they need to spend out of pocket to receive healthcare. So the formalization of the job market is really important as a condition to access Social Security, and apart from that, it allows to question if the provision is truly universal, because I believe it is almost universal, and it is not providing a universal service in the way we conceive it for everyone who lives within the territory. Thirdly, when we have a vulnerable job market to the external factors such as the subprime mortgage crisis or the recent COVID-19 pandemic that negatively affect the Costa Rican job market, there's a reduction of taxes through contributions of the formal job market, and the job posts are also diminishing. And there's a moment where there's needs in attention in healthcare, and that increases the pressure to provide the services. Another argument as for this perspective is related to automation due to artificial intelligence in Latin America. Also, I would like to highlight that the Costa Rican job market is really vulnerable to external impacts. We saw it with the COVID-19 pandemic and the feeling and deceleration of the Costa Rican job market. Remember that an important percentage of the exports for Costa Rica are sent to the US. So we are vulnerable to the global financial crisis and the changes in the commodities market, as in the case of Costa Rica coffee, banana, and other exports. So taking into account these elements, I provide some indicators that provide us a glimpse of the current Costa Rican job market. Firstly, we have this graph. This is the unemployment rate that we have currently in Costa Rica. The last historic data we have for the 2010-2023 period. This is the latest trend, and as you can see, we have an increasing trend. But what we see is that unemployment in Costa Rica has been relatively stable, around 10% of the job force. In 2020, you see this spike in the unemployment rate. It pretty much doubled the rate from 10 to 24% in 2020 Q2, and it has been decreasing. However, for the studied period, we see a growing trend on unemployment, and this is around 10% of the job force. Here we see on blue the percentage of the population without employment. On orange, we have the broadened unemployment, that is those who, after looking for a job, stop looking anymore. And on gray, we have the combined unemployment plus sub-employment. In Costa Rica, we understand sub-employment as those who could work full-time, but they are working part-time. The information I want to convey to you is the trends of unemployment, sub-employment, and broadened unemployment. So we have pretty much doubled the amount of people who can be part of the Costa Rican job market and contributing to the social security of the country. But if we add to this figure those who could have full-time jobs, then we see that this figure goes to almost 40%. And this is a negative impact for Social Security, because as we saw in architecture for the contribution system and the Costa Rican Social Security system, it is highly dependent on the contributions performed by the market, that is the formal job market, and this has an impact on the budget of the whole country to face all of its contributions. So in other words, the Costa Rican job market is trending towards precarization, and we can thus expect an impact not only on the social security system and contributions, but also on the fiscal health and tax burden. So not only do we have a trend that's negative on unemployment and sub-employment, but in this chart we also have the trend for the last 13 years towards informality. Informality in Costa Rica has been maintained around 40% of the workforce over the last Qs. It was slightly reduced, but the average has been around for the job force. And this is truly important for the Costa Ricans Social Security because for this country, the definition of Social Security is those who are not contributing to Social Security because they are not part of any registry of property or they don't have formal accountability or accounting, sorry. So we need to clear something up. Maybe someone who is part of the informal job market contributes to the Social Security through insurance as freelancers. So this trend may have a variance with respect to the independent workers. However, if we sum the data that's obtained by the most recent data of unemployment and informality, the most optimist figure is around 50% of the Costa Rican job market does not contribute to Social Security due to unemployment or informality. And this has a deep impact on Social Security for the country because as we are highly dependent of the formal contributions, there is an effect of the contributions and income, and this generates a larger burden on the state who constitutionally needs to have enough money to have this system run both in pensions and in healthcare. So in this regard, the main trends on the Costa Rican job market, unemployment, informality, and subemployment talk about the scenario of high effects. And it also talks about something else. For instance, the inability of the state to generate a policy that's strong enough to reactivate the formal job market with high formality. Also, I would like to bring this to the conclusions. We need to think about challenging the idea of the current Costa Rican system. We can add to this the risks of automation. And by that, what I mean is, for instance, the case of robots and AI and automated production systems. Oh, yes, I forgot about this chart. Here, I performed an exercise about the amount of hours worked and the productivity for the countries of American OECD countries. On the left, we have the countries. We have Latin American OECD members. Here we have Mexico, Costa Rica, Chile, and Colombia. And I compared this to Spain and to the US. Both Mexico, Colombia, and Costa Rica are the countries where you work the most per year. We work 200 hours more than on the US, and the average is 300 hours more than in Spain. However, when I look at the reason why, we see the average productivity per hour, and what we can see is that if we compare the amount of hours versus the wealth that is produced per hour, what we see is that the US produces pretty much 3 times more wealth per hour worked than in Costa Rica. In Spain, the amount is double, and the difference between Mexico, Colombia, and Costa Rica are minimum, but we are on the limit of worked hours. And as you can see on the Gini index on the right, what we see is that this does not translate to an improvement of living conditions for the common folk. So it seems like working a lot, it's not the answer that we need to make up for the amount of employment. I don't mean to say that the amount of job vacancies is not important. It is important, but it is not the only thing that matters. It needs to be formal job markets for the system and it needs to be highly productive. Now, I would like to see the examples related to the risks due to automation. here we have the percentage of workers with high risk for the Latin American region. There is a trend, and this is a, a study of the Inter-American Development Bank for automation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we see the trends for Costa Rica are really, really endangered by precarization. We have high unemployment and high informality. And apart from that, we need to see the risks that we are experiencing by the appearance of automated production systems such as AI, such as robot implementations, and machine learning. And on red, we see Costa Rica. And the trend is really common for Central America. We have a regional trend of 70% of those who are working high are in high risk of being displaced by or replaced by automation. Then, deepening into this statistic, we have an OECD study of job creation and local economic development for 2020. And here we have this quote that says around 14% of employments on the OECD zone altogether are on risk to be automated, whereas 32% is likely to experience important changes. This is to say that robots and AI are here to stay and they are transforming the Costa Rican job market. And the question I make is, are we ready to generate or reactivate or boost new sources of employment according to the new challenges that we are living in our region due to automation? I am not so optimistic in this regard. I believe it is a risk that we need to consider from the perspective of Social Security to contain the adverse effects of automation. And this leads me to the first summary. The Costa Rican job market is truly important for the Social Security system in Costa Rica because of the current architecture of Costa Rican financing system is highly dependent on the formal job market conditions, which, as you see, are not being fulfilled in Costa Rica as for a while ago. It was originally created as a system for all life employment with increasing wages, but the trends talk about high informality, low productivity per worked hour, high unemployment. We saw it on the statistics of unemployment and underemployment. And apart from that, we need to add the first wave of the risks of automation that we are living in our country. So in other words, we have this first big challenge for the Costa Rican job social security system because it explains the automation risk of the system for social security. And apart from that, it also creates other new problems for the system in Costa Rica that are related to the domestic budget and the way we bring funds to it. So in more simple words, on the tax point of view, we need enough resources to face all the needs of Social Security that the population has. And this brings me to the second issue of today, which is the second challenge, which is the state debt and the fiscal crisis. In this regard, I bring to you four main departure points. The first one is that the Costa Rican state is facing a fiscal consolidation process that's been lasting decades. And the most recent example is the new law that was acted in 2019, and it implements a fiscal rule due to the criticality of the Costa Rican state that was experienced after 2008. This is the first point of departure. Costa Rica is currently going through fiscal consolidation. So please bear that idea in mind because we will go back to it in a minute. Secondly, the state created responsibility through law and also through broadening the coverage to given populations without economic content. So this means that the state assumed the responsibility to gain new responsibilities, but it did not create the budgets so that the public institutions in charge of supplying the social security services can face the situation. And this brings us to the third point. As the state has a responsibility with social security due to the contributions it has to do, this economic content has translated into debt that Costa Rica has to Social Security. And as a fourth, we have this debt, and the state has done partial payments. But upon doing so, the state has not created mechanisms that correct and guarantee the income that allowed to face the responsibility. We will see each topic in detail in brief. Now we have a brief timeline of the origin of debt. At the beginning of the 1990s, we had two important issues to understand the debt of the state to Costa Rican Social Security. On 93, we saw the creating the Law 7374. This was a law to create a hospital, San Rafael de la Juana. In that law, in Article 5 of that law, the responsibility was created for the state towards those who are living on the street so that they can access ordinary attention on the Social Security institution. So, from this law, we have the state contributing on a population who is vulnerable. In this case, those in street conditions. Then we have in 95 a reform of the healthcare system where we moved the responsibility who was part of the Ministry of Health towards the Social Security institution. So, despite of this, the state does not provide enough resources to Social Security institution of Costa Rica to provide for this situation. And these are the important points to understand the origin of debt of the state to the institution, to the fund. So we have been paying partially as a state due to the 7374 law, but the state is still not paying to the fund what it owes for the responsibility of primary healthcare. And this debt has been accumulating on to this point. In 2008, we have an external crash, which is the subprime mortgage crisis, and the response of the Costa Rican government was a shield, and it led to different decisions that on the short term tried to contain the adverse effects, but on the long term, it created a fiscal crisis that has been lagging on as of 2008 to this day. And in 2019, we have yet another external impact for Social Security in Costa Rica due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a brief timeline of the state debt due to a series of decisions that were taken in the 1990s with new responsibilities without economic backing and without the necessary funds to face the needs. And then we have two external impacts, one in 2008 and one in 2019, that have seriously impacted on the Costa Rican healthcare system, and they call for greater services. For instance, in 2019, due to the pandemic, Social Security in Costa Rica was the first line of attention to the effects saw on the pandemic. So taking this in mind, here we have the financial deficit as a percentage of the GDP for the 2000 to 2020 stage. You see that for the year 2000 to 2018, we have a superávit financial situation, but as of 2008, we have a decline of the primary deficit of the Costa Rican state. And this is due to the external impact that's produced by the subprime mortgage crisis. And what I want to show to you with this chart is that how is it possible that the state brings a debt since the 1990 with a superávit up to the moment that it was unsustainable due to external factors. So I would like to answer briefly this question. So why is it relevant to talk about the 2008 crisis? For the debt of the state to Social Security. First of all, it is the origin of the fiscal crisis of Costa Rica, which provides two simultaneous crises. One, where the state needs to consolidate to contain the growth of debt, and the other one is it starts carrying debt to the Social Security from the early 1990s and over 35 years. So it is important to see this simultaneity of crisis, the fiscal crisis and the sustainability crisis for Social Security. So during recessions, meaning external negative impacts, for instance, a global crisis or a pandemic. During a recession, during the critical stage due to global crisis or a pandemic or climate change, the expenditure goes up because there is a greater need in health. But the income through quotes, that is through the formal job market and the national budget, trend to be reduced. It's and have a negative impact on the job market. So there is a diminishing income due to taxing because the job market is impacted both domestically and the export. Costa Rica is highly dependent on the tourism and export industries. And with COVID-19, we have a huge reduction of tourism and the profits that we were receiving due to, for instance, tourism.
In the year 2009, we noticed that in Costa Rica, we have a decrease in foreign direct investment, remittances, and also construction was stagnated due to the echo of the real estate crisis in our country. So with all of this, we can see that the Costa Rican system is vulnerable vis-a-vis external impacts. So we experienced that during the 70s due to the sovereign and oil crisis. So we can see that there is a vicious cycle. The public debt that we have noticed is not accounting debt with Social Security. Recently, the debt of the amount by the state of Costa Rica is around 3.7 billion colons. So to have an idea, is around 6% of the GDP in Costa Rica. So this is what the state of Costa Rica is owing to Social Security services. So that's why the superávit since the 90s till 2007 have been positive because they were removing from the accounting of the debt. They were not considering the debt of the state with Social Security. If they took into account that debt, pretty sure the debt of the state would be double. So it would be a debt of around 8 or 6% till 12%. So that's why we have more tax pressure before external and critical scenarios, as I mentioned before, with the pandemic and more tax pressure uh, due to the lack of formality of the employment environment in Costa Rica. So we see a close relationship between the work labor towards precarization and the tax system. And there is a close relationship between the tax system and the fund of social security and the current system of contributions, because it depends of conditions that haven't occurred in Costa Rica from decades ago, because increasingly works are or jobs are informal, and we don't have an increase in salaries, and this has an impact not only in social security but also in the taxes in the fiscal system of the Costa Rican system. So, as a recap, let me tell you that indicators about tax health were accomplished by uh, sacrificing social investments. But we need to carry out more research in order to answer to all these hypotheses. Another trend. There were assignation of responsibilities without economic content that recently have increased the state debt with Social Security. Therefore, and we saw this in the case of the piece of Act 7374 in the year 74, and the contribution for primary health. Thirdly, I think that we have financing conditions of Social Security that are not related with the real labor work in Costa Rica, because as you saw, it is very informal and is highly dependent on the conditions of the formalization of the job market. So increasingly, we see the precarization of the job market and increasing fiscal problem that Costa Rica has suffered from different decades. So maybe we need to pay more attention and make more research about other alternatives for the architecture of the contributed system. So I think that we need to think about other ways to finance Social Security that are more appropriate, that are in alignment with the current job situation. When you analyze Social Security, you can realize that there are two main trends: the load over the payroll or contributions by general taxes. And I am not saying which one is better or worse. Each one of them have different scopes and different limitations and obstacles and areas of opportunities. But we can think about another way of contributions. In Costa Rica, there are populations that are not having access to Social Security for migration status, for the informality in the job market or unemployment. And these are ways for excluding people from Social Security, and they are not given the necessary right from the human rights perspective, because we all contribute to the well-being of our population. So this is just food for thought, and maybe you can think about that, because I don't know what is the response for the state, but this is a concern that I have had for several years about if the current contribution system in Costa Rica is the most appropriate one for the current situations of the job market in Costa Rica. This is a concern that I have. And now I would like to talk about another challenge that I haven't analyzed as much, but I would like to present to you some arguments that I think that it's the next a great challenge of Social Security, and this has to do with migration and climate change. But before that, let me tell you that during the first two challenges, we noticed that the Costa Rican contribution system has an infrastructure that depends highly from taxes. But there is another set of indicators that allow us to challenge that architecture, because I think that is not related with the current job situations in Costa Rica. And we see the relationship between the job market in Costa Rica and the fiscal crisis and its impact on the social security in Costa Rica. And now I would like to focus on an area that is very interesting for me. I am going to present to you four main arguments. First, climate change. In Central America, this region, according to the most recent statistics, Central American region is one of the most regions that is going to be severely impacted by climate change, and we are experiencing that. We have noticed the Niño phenomena and the high waves of heat that are going to have an impact in the following situations. We have more migration pressures because there is an increase in temperature. There is an impact in the growth of seeds and a decrease in water supply. Where there's no water, there's no life. So the Central America Pacific area has been impacted highly by the heat wave that we are currently experiencing. And as a result, we see a lot of social unrest that is going to generate more migration problems. So climate change is here and is having an impact not only in the eco-social systems and eco-environmental systems. And we are going to see a readaptation of the ecological systems. We are going to see new diseases and new epidemiological profiles. So we can see that climate change has a severe impact, and it's going to affect the regional impact. Costa Rica is a country of transit for migrants. We noticed that with the first wave of migrants from Haiti that went from Brazil up to the United States. And secondly, we experienced this in the past with the Venezuelan migration. Why is this important? Because while they are transit Costa Rica state has to give them some health services. Children and young people have to have coverage, as well as pregnant women. The Costa Rica state have to provide these services. Therefore, Social Security has a new instrument. It's an agreement to ensure migrant people in Costa Rica. So we have a special fund from Costa Rica and the ACNUR. And it's a very important figure. But this is the third year where we have signed this agreement, and through the ACNUR, we provide economic resources so the Costa Rican Social Security Fund can provide for healthcare to migrants that are transit Costa Rica, or if they need some health care in the refugee centers in the region. The ACNUR or the UNHCR. It's important to consider that migrants are highly vulnerable before the Costa Rican Social Security because we depend highly on the formalization degree of jobs. And unfortunately, in Costa Rica, we have a lot of people that are working informally, not because they want to, because they have been vulnerable. And besides, we are speaking about migrants that have health needs. And if Costa Rica wouldn't have that agreement with the UNHCR, we would have seen more tax pressure to provide care to all these migrants. So for me, the third challenge currently is about this: how to provide enough resources to social security in Costa Rica before these challenges like climate change, regional political conflicts, besides the social unrest that we see, and all the wars in Palestine, and all the problematic situations in other parts of the world. So I think that this could be an answer to the migration needs that we have in the region. We need to explore and to strengthen them even more. So we need to think that migration is a highly vulnerable population for the social security in Costa Rica. I am about to wrap up. These are the three main challenges that we are facing in Costa Rica. Tomorrow, we are going to have another conference, and we are going to be talking about the current challenges for social security and its relevance for social peace, with two main factors and two members of the Social Security Fund and the former chair of the Social Security Fund in Costa Rica. So we invite you to be part of this debate. I am going to be part of that debate, but addressing different challenges. And to wrap up, I am going to share with you scientific diplomacy in a nutshell. What we are looking for in this Center for Development and Center for the Peace, we would like to join into other networks of research and scientific cooperation. We would like to have a compares research. Last year, there was a conference about if we need to blame informality for this social crisis. I attended that conference. I was very interested. However, I think that its applicability to the Costa Rican system is not viable, because the public policy depends on the job market. So this is just food for thought. We need to look for opportunities to publish papers, and we are interested on having exchanges for scientific academics, for PhD students, or to share different experiences. Currently, in our line of research, we have addressed different items that we have developed. First, the price of medication, because Costa Rica, I think, has the highest price of medications in Latin America. So we are trying to provide some opportunities and alternatives to decrease the price. So we are very interested in both the cost and accessibility. And the national system for public policies of cares has to be addressing the care for children, young people, and old people. And there is another line of research: old, elderly people, and retired people. Dr. Perez Rodriguez is going to be talking about that. And we would like to invite you to be with us in the first Ibero-American conference in Costa Rica from July 15 to 17 about basic universal income, because we are considering that maybe this is a new way for Social Security. This is going to be my presentation in the Congress. I am inviting you. We are looking forward to see you there. And we have published different scientific papers, but other papers related with the job market, Social Security, insurance, health insurance, and retirement insurance. So be in touch with us. And if you are interested in these different lines of research, you can be in touch with me. We can welcome you in Costa Rica, and we can have some remote meetings. I'm about to wrap up. And some general conclusions. I think that there is a close relationship between the tax, wage, and social policies. We have financing conditions that are unrelated from the current job market. We have assigned responsibilities of economic content that increase the debt. And there is a struggle between fiscal consolidation and state debt. The state has two main challenges that they cannot face at the same time. So in the last two administration, Carlos Alvarado's administration and Hugo Chavez has uh, focused on consolidating the fiscal debt and not the state debt. And I don't have an answer for this question, but I think that we need to challenge the architecture of the current contribution system in Costa Rica because it's not considering the realities of the job in Costa Rica. Thank you for your attention. And if you wish, you can be in touch with me with my email, abadillas@uned.ac.cr, or my social media, Andre J. Badilla Solano. Thank you all for this opportunity to share the work that we are doing in Costa Rica. I am going to be here if you have questions. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andre, for a great presentation. I think it was a very comprehensive glance about the challenges. And after this presentation at noon, we are going to have some dialogues about climate change that is of your interest. And tomorrow we are going to talk about the rights of Social Security. And the Fund of Costa Rica is going to talk about the agreement that they have with the UNHCR or ACNUR. In Zoom, I see that Rafael Nieva raised his hand. Fer, can you help us? Rafael, you have the floor. Can you hear me? Rafael? Well, there are a couple of questions in the social media, and we will back to you, Rafael. Andre, regarding automation, can you elaborate on the problems for automation specifically? What are the economic or the economical sectors where we are going to see the impacts of this phenomenon? Another question. From your perspective, we don't know if there is an analysis about what we are going to do with the population that is going to be displaced by this automation, how to reinsert them in the job sector, people that are going to be replaced by AI. You have the floor. Thank you so much. As a recap, automation and the most impacted economic sectors and alternatives for job displacement? Yes. I am going to start with the second question, and I am going to wrap up with the first one. Sorry for that. Last year, I gave a conference entitled Universal Income, AI, and Robots. And since then, I am questioning if universal income could become a tool for social security. And secondly, if this could be an option to contain adverse events like displacement or transition for job losses. Job market transportation as a result of AI, automation, machine learning. Why universal income could become an alternative? Well, maybe because it ensures a floor for well-being and minimum levels of consumption. So in the current productive scheme that highly depends on consumption will allow us that the industry that is automated could maintain current levels for economic growth and consumption by ensuring a universal basic income for all the population, but also because the UBI will be consumption capabilities to populations that historically didn't have the UBI. It is going to have a positive impact in vulnerable population like uh, number one or number two because they have a lot of needs. And with this UBI, the new income that is going to become a consumption. So it's going to have a multiplying effect in consumption. So could be an alternative for the transition process towards new sources of employment. What are going to be the productive sectors or the economic sectors that are going to be more impacted by this? I have a slide, but it's not with me now. If you give me just a moment, I will present that to you. And this is about that. Which are the employments that are going to be more impacted by job automation? Just give me just 1 second.
No te preocupes, Andrei, esperamos.
Well, you can see the slide. This is the percentage of employment exposed to automation in the US. The supporting staff, clerks, has a risk of 46% to be displaced by AI. Secondly, legal works, engineers, architectures, 37%. Social services, 33%. Compute, mathematics, 29%. How can we read this slide? Manual labors like cleaning, maintenance, janitoring, construction are the ones that have minor risk for displacement by AI, while works like social security, labors, others have higher risk of displacement.
So in other words, you won't need 5 lawyers when you can have one doctor in law and an AI to assist them. So what we are experiencing or seeing is that high specialization that has generated so many employments will be replaced by AI. I believe this is the answer to both questions, I guess. Yes, we have a couple minutes. So we have another question regarding scientific diplomacy. From your perspective, what do you believe could be the benefits or problems of the so-called scientific diplomacy as part of this new diplomacy scenario? And regarding research, how can this tackle the common today problems in the Costa Rican context? And personally, I would like to ask you if we can talk about social security diplomacy beyond science. Yes, I love that term, social security diplomacy. I love it because it seems like compared policy allow us to learn lessons without taking bitter pills. So we are living in a region that's experiencing job market transformation, and the answer won't go from won't be sourced by a researcher in Brazil, Uruguay, or Costa Rica. Scientific diplomacy is just that. It is a tool for cooperation that allows to share experiences and to add efforts to try to reach the solutions and scientific research programs that allow to explain and predict. But this scientific diplomacy cannot be by the academic corporations. Open access needs to lead the way so that we can have open access to all the region and data exchange. I believe you are providing an innovating focus where we can talk about social security diplomacy, which will allow us to study, restudy, and propose new initiatives. And for an instance, you had activities about informality and its impact on social security. And I love the activity of the last year because it was really close to what we were doing regarding the job market impact. And the informality in Costa Rica, or the main indicators, seem to show that it does have an impact on the Costa Rican social security, and it's a deep impact. So it seems like the Costa Rican data make us question the validity of this affirmation as a generalizing capacity to all social security because it has its particularities. The way to contribute is different. We are more similar in our social security to other regions in Central America. So it seems to me like it makes it richer and it allows us to access problems. One problem is funding and work equipment that's necessary. I am part of a work team of 3 or 4 people. So in positive, we are few, but we are brave. And we suit up and try to provide to the table. But when we work on greater numbers, we can provide more. And that's the importance on the social security diplomacy in this moment. Sorry if I went overboard. No, thank you. I believe that we had another question, but the person is not online anymore. But with no more questions here or on the digital platforms, I believe this is all of the questions. And we would like to thank you for your time and the participation of you, our most recent member. And I believe it is a constant dynamic effort we are making. And we wish you the best of luck for your activities that you are carrying in the Social Security Week. And in the name of the Secretary General, we say thank you and congratulate you for your activities. Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Also to our audience, we'll be back at noon to talk about social security and climate change. Both in Zoom and social media will have the background image, and we'll see you at noon.
3 para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonita seguros consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Para seguridad social.
Migrantes. Nosotros no somos de aquí, llegamos caminando de muy lejos, pero eso fue cuando yo todavía era una niña. Los domingos vendemos fruta en el mercado. Cuando no hay mucha gente, mi mamá atiende a mi hermano que llora y pide comida a cada rato. Yo ayudo a pesar y a dar el vuelto. La gente casi siempre me sonríe.
Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de invalidez. El abuelo de Sofía siempre habla como si estuviera gritando. Sofía dice que ya no escucha, porque cuando estaba joven trabajaba en una fábrica donde había mucho ruido. Desde hace tiempo está incapacitado, pero igual está ocupado todo el tiempo reparando cosas que la gente le lleva. Es como si tuviera magia en las manos.
2, 3 para seguridad social.
Prestaciones por maternidad. Por la ventana veo llegar a la señora Regina. Camina despacio y a veces se agarra de las paredes. Tiene una panza enorme porque está a punto de tener un bebé. A veces yo la ayudo con las bolsas y ella me agradece con la mirada. Hace días que no va al trabajo. Tiene licencia de maternidad y cuida a su bebé, que es lo más importante ahora.
Un, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de sobrevivientes. La abuela Carmen viene todas las tardes a cuidarnos mientras mamá trabaja. A nosotros nos gusta porque nos cuenta historias de cuando era pequeña. Desde que el abuelo murió, ella recibe una pensión. Por eso puede estar con nosotros y consentirnos. Además de historias, de vez en cuando nos trae dulces y cosas ricas para merendar.
para seguridad social.
Prestaciones en caso de accidente de trabajo y de enfermedad profesional. El celular sonó justo a la hora del almuerzo. Llamaron para decir que mi papá había sufrido un accidente en el trabajo. Aún recuerdo ese día. Todos estábamos asustados porque nos imaginamos muchas cosas. Ahora, cada vez que lo veo sentado en la sala con la mirada perdida, siento que está triste. No sé si porque le toca guardar reposo o porque debe esperar mucho tiempo para empezar a caminar de nuevo.
Que es para seguridad social.
Prestaciones familiares. En mi barrio hay muchas familias grandes, como la mía. Somos 4 hermanos y viene un bebé en camino. Mi papá dice que donde comen 2, comen 3, y donde comen 6, comen 7, porque estamos esperando que el bebé nazca pronto. Por fortuna, ahora va a recibir una ayuda para los gastos que se avecinan. Como dicen, tener un hijo es tener una bendición.
1, 2, 3, para seguridad social.
Prestaciones por vejez. Mi abuelo sale por las tardes a la plaza. Ahí se ve con sus amigos. Don Julio, que trabajaba con él en la misma empresa, y otros señores que se reúnen para hablar bajo la sombra de los árboles. Casi siempre hablan de sus pensiones. El día que la cobran es el más feliz de todos.
Para seguridad social.
Cuando un niño o una niña, un adolescente, un adulto o una persona mayor está enfermo, tiene derecho a que el Estado le garantice asistencia médica. Y si por alguna razón una persona no puede trabajar, debe recibir un ingreso para poder mantener a su familia, hasta que pueda encontrar un nuevo empleo. Todas las personas mayores tienen derecho a una pensión y las madres a un apoyo por maternidad. Los beneficios que contribuyen para que exista protección para las personas a lo largo de toda su vida es lo que se llama seguridad social. La seguridad social es un derecho humano, contribuye con el bienestar colectivo y proporciona medidas para la inclusión. De este modo, se garantizan sociedades más justas.
Para seguridad social.
Todos contribuimos. En un país, todas las personas que realizan un trabajo formal o informal contribuyen con la seguridad social, que es una manera de ayudar al bien común. Las personas que ayudan en las tareas de la casa, los ancianos, los niños y aquellos que tienen alguna discapacidad aportan de muchas maneras a la seguridad social. Todos participamos para que una comunidad sea próspera. La ayuda que damos para distribuirnos las cargas son formas de crecer juntos.
Para seguridad social.
Trabajadores del campo. La señora Lupe vende empanadas en la esquina de mi casa. Todas las mañanas está ahí, al lado de su cesta. Siempre dice lo mismo. ¡Empanadas! ¡Empanadas! como si cantara. Antes trabajaba como jornalera. Nos dijo un día que mi papá le preguntó, pero se vino porque allá es muy difícil y ella ya tiene su edad. Lo veo en sus manos cada vez que le compramos.
Seguridad Social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Un, dos, tres para Seguridad Social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonita seguros consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Buenos días a todas y a todos. Bienvenidos a este diálogo por la
Hello,
seguridad social
everyone.
en el
Back,
contexto del cambio
we're back
climático.
to this
En la segunda jornada de la
CISS
Semana de la Seguridad Social
second day
en
of the
Interamericana
week
de Seguridad
of
Social.
Social Security.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this dialogue on social security in the context of climate change, in the context of the Social Security Week 2014. El día de hoy tendremos un panel con
Today
invitado
we'll have a
muy de
panel with
lujo. Para
incredible
esto tenemos a nuestra moderadora Verónica
guests.
Zamudio.
Here we'll have Veronica Zamudio as the moderator. Could you please introduce yourself? I don't think I'm getting audio. Thank you. Hello, everyone, for being with us both in person and remotely. It is a pleasure to be with you to present this dialogue that we have created for Social Security in the context of climate change. I will first of all introduce our members of the panels, the presenter of the document that we will have, which is a meta paper called Facing Climate Change, How to Support Buffering and Adapting Social Security in the Job and Employment Measures. The author of the document is Quinn Flemings, who's working more than 20 years in the federal Belgian social security system. He is responsible for scientific development and has been part of political reforms and has boosted the Belgian Association of Socio Plus, the European mechanism to share knowledge about social security with member states of the EU. He is currently the coordinator of the development of knowledge of Socioplus. Within this context, he wrote the meta paper that interests us today. He has dedicated his career both as academic and political evaluator. He has a doctorate degree on the development of the well-being state in Western Europe in the Louvain University, and he began on its career, among others, in the Transnational East Center. He has worked in the OECD report on income inequality. Welcome. We also have Landy Sanchez Peña, who is a professor and researcher of the demographic, urban, and environmental studies from Colmex. She is a doctor in sociology by Wisconsin-Madison University with a subspecialty in geography. She works in population and environment topics and several branches of social inequality, such as the spatial dimension, work disparities, and gender disparities. Currently, she is focusing on two main subjects. Firstly, the intersection between climate change and well-being and the impact of extreme impacts in urban populations, as well as adaptive policies with gender sensitiveness. She also looks at the sex disparities and the paid and non-paid work. She is part of different academic and editorial means of communications, both domestic and overseas, and she is part of the National Network of Researchers. She has also worked as director of the Colmex Environmental, Urban, and Demographic Center of Studies. We also have remotely the participation of Dr. Deborah Ann Rees, who is an experienced executive with over 42 years of experience in the area of Social Security. She has held several charges in the Belize Fund of Social Security, such as the management of information systems, the management of registry of beneficiaries, the industrial relationships, and others. She also has worked as general director during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. She is currently working as a general director of the Social Security Board of Belize as of 2021 to this day. Deborah believes in social protection, the strengthening the abilities of leadership, both at the initiative, public and private. Let's welcome every single one of you. And thank you for being part of this panel. And with no further ado, I will tell you how we will have this dialogue. First of all, we will have a 10-minute presentation by Kuhn, the author of the meta paper, and then we will have comments on Deborah Rees during 12 minutes, sorry, and then we will have the floor for Landy Sanchez up to 12 minutes. Later, we will have a Q&A session, and afterwards, we will have a discussion on the meta paper, and the author himself will present the work of SocioPlus about the development of knowledge. With no further ado, we will have the floor for Kuhn.
Thank you very much, Veronica, also for this opportunity to share my work with all of you. So I work for SocioPlus. So it's a European facility financed by the European Commission and Belgium, France.
I'm not hearing the audio very well. I don't know if we could turn it up a bit.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay. I do, Andrew.
técnico. ¿Nos escuchan ahora? La señora
Yes, I can
Débora.
confirm. We can hear.
I am here, but the sound is very low, but I don't want to keep back, but I'm not hearing.
Okay, señora Débora, please switch the translation in Zoom. In the original audio in English, please. ¿Puede escucharnos ahora? Más fuerte.
Can
que
you
hace-
hear us now? A little bit better than previously?
You can go ahead and I will settle the audio. I can hear you, but faintly.
Everybody can hear me well now? Yeah, well, as I was saying, so CISS is a facility financed by the European Union, Belgium, France, and Spain. And it's a technical facility aimed at providing technical cooperation on the subject of inclusive social policies, labor markets, and employment policies. So it's a demand-driven facility. So we only work on the request of partner countries, and it's focused on peer-to-peer, so public sector to public sector cooperation. And so, but we have done many activities in the past, about 600 of them, in total about 20,000 expert days. And the purpose of knowledge developers is really to valorize, to make this knowledge accessible to everybody. And so one of the things we do is drafting these meta papers. And so the objective of a meta paper is to valorize these actions. And so I wrote one on the role of social protection and employment policies within the context of climate change. And so I made a broad overview of all kinds of policies that have been implemented around the world within the context of climate change. And so to get a real idea of the practical issues. Because that's the aim of CISS, is really to provide practical assistance on policies that work. And so, this report is now available in Spanish and in Portuguese, if you take a look at it, if you're interested in it. And so, of course, the context is climate change itself. Climate change is a reality and has a huge impact both on nature and humanity. And about more than one third of the population of the world is vulnerable to the consequences of climate change. But these consequences differ across continents and countries. There are different conditions around the world, and also there are differences among groups of people. So certain groups of the population are more vulnerable to the consequences of climate change. And so, so a lot of countries have already been affected by the consequences of climate change. So over the last 20 years, we have seen many climate-related events and disasters. Some countries that are more experienced already in experiencing all kinds of climate weather issues, see these issues be aggravated by climate change. And so we have a lot of experience already in the world. It's not a new thing. We are already confronting, as we speak, climate change. But there are large differences around the world also in not only in exposure to climate change, but also to vulnerability. We see that in African countries, the vulnerability is very high because they don't have the resources to confront many of the consequences of climate change. You have countries that are quite exposed to climate change. Mexico, Colombia is among them, many countries in Asia, but many of them have better resources also, so they are better able to deal with it. Climate change is, of course, also a social risk. And so because, first of all, the exposure to the consequences of climate change differs among population groups. Some of the vulnerable population groups are also more vulnerable to the consequences of climate change. They're more exposed to it. Often they live in in areas that are more risking to be affected by flooding, by heat waves, and so on. So often they are really more exposed. And on top of that, they're also more vulnerable. So they don't have the resources to confront the consequences of climate change, and they have difficulties to adapt. And we see also that vulnerable groups are also more vulnerable to the policies that are aimed at mitigating the future impact of climate change. And so, for instance, energy taxes and so on, they affect the poor more than others. So they're also more vulnerable for that. And so that means that social protection has an important role to play within the context of climate change. And in fact, we see that it is really one of the driving forces in social protection nowadays. So what can social protection do to address climate change? Well, first of all, social protection reinforces the resilience of the population. We are good at that with social protection. Social protection has been built to protect people, to make them more resilient to the risks of life, the sickness, disability, unemployment, and so on. So that's why social protection was developed. But it was also, it's not only for, it's not only for individual risks, but also it buffers against crisis. We've seen that in the past, the financial crisis, there you see that social protection played the role of buffering the economy and people against the impact of these financial crises. And more recently, the COVID crisis, we see how much impact that had, how important social protection was there to protect our peoples against the impact of that pandemic, and also the socio-economic impact of that pandemic, not only the health issues. So it's really important to increase resilience, and also it's also important to support people during such crisis. And you have one of the impacts of climate change is, of course, you have more risks and more risk of disasters. And so social protection can reinforce the resilience. And so, like I said, we have done that in the past. And also, but then the issue is, of course, that the better coverage we have of social protection, the more universal the coverage is for social protection, the more resilience we can offer to people. So the coverage is very important in the context of climate change. And that's a good thing, because I think we are all aiming to improve that. Then also we provide, next slide, please. We provide support also to during a crisis. So we can adjust our protection systems to provide more protection during a specific crisis. There again, we have traditional social protection already has quite some instruments to do that. We can also help people reorient during a crisis. And so it's really, we can provide a lot of support to people, both during a crisis and also during changes that are related to slow onset climate events. You see that some regions become less habitable. Sometimes, so Mr. Solana of Costa Rica mentioned migration. So some regions become less livable. Some crops cannot no longer be produced. And there we can also help through social protection and also employment policies to reorient people and to help them find a new way of living, and so to support them during this slow onset crisis provoked by climate change. Next slide, please. And so there are many interesting techniques, but that many of us also used during the COVID pandemic. For instance, we can increase the coverage temporarily of our social protection systems during a crisis. We can try to cover more people when there is a crisis. We can also supplement the benefits that we provide temporarily to allow people to better cope with the crisis. And also the administrative resources of social protection are really important. We can use these administrative resources of social protection to better target people that are affected by events related to climate change. So this piggybacking, so using what is there, the administrative system of social protection schemes to provide assistance targeted related to climate change. And also, and so you can also try to implement more automatic mechanisms to address the vulnerabilities associated with climate events. And so in that context, there are many examples around the world. And so the idea of the meta paper was to give really an overview of what is already there, what are the practical experiences of the countries around the world with climate change. And one of the things also is the importance to have an integrative approach to what is already there. Social protection is already good, is already useful within the context of climate change, but it works better if you integrate it with disaster relief, and also when you integrate it with, with plans to address climate change. You really have to integrate that in your planification, and few countries do, in fact. Next slide, please. And also within the context of the decarbonization, the green transition, social protection can also provide help with that. I mentioned energy taxes that are sometimes associated with green transition policies. We want to decarbonize our economies, and there also social protection can provide support so that the more vulnerable parts of the population are less affected by these policies. Sometimes it also means that we have to restructure our economy to make our economy more greener, to decarbonize our economy. That means that we have to help people so restructure their activities. Green jobs are important, so providing assistance in developing green sectors, green jobs is quite important. Helping people that are affected by job losses because of the decarbonization, that are losing their job because some heavily carbonized industries are being closed. There as well, social protection already has quite some experience in addressing these issues of economic restructuring and can also be of help. Next slide. So, and so we have, you can compensate people for the impact of policies. Like I said, also the green jobs. You can also influence people through policies to adapt green behavior, for instance, preferring reintegration into green jobs. And so, so there is a lot of things that can be done through social protection within the context of the green transition. And then what we hear more and more, we read about eco-social policies. That is really an integrated approach to the challenges of both social protection, the economy, and climate change. And so there's a lot of research work being done on that subject. And so, but less experience with actually policies that have been developed within that context. So, but it's also, I also mentioned it in the meta paper. And so I also have a long list with references that you can use during your own work. And so I try to really have an inventory of everything that is available on that subject. Next slide, please. So the main lessons learned, well, coverage is important. Having a good social protection coverage and approaching universal coverage really help, because it makes your economy more resilient, and you provide, give more broader support to your population within the context of climate change. An integrated approach is really important. So try to also link it up with other, planification. So social protection, sometimes we are in silos. So we have to work together with people that are specialized in disaster relief and in climate policies, so that we have an integrative approach. So that really helps to make things better. So there are lots of tools that are mechanisms that are quite interesting and can inspire things that we are not used to do, but that we could really include in our planification, like these sensitive mechanisms that we can more easily and more quickly address needs during climate-related events. Social protection can also help with structural changes and really assist also an ecological, a green transition. So there are many lessons to be learned, I think, and I try to give really an overview in that meta paper so that you can really find practical examples of policies that are interesting, techniques that are interesting. And I see it as a work in progress. I'm still open to learn from everybody. So it was really hard to find good examples, practices. And so I continue to collect good practices and interesting cases. So if people attending this do know about some interesting practices, they can always contact me. And so I will try to integrate that in a database so that we have more cases and more practical policies that can inspire other policymakers. So it's all in that paper. As you can see, it has been translated to Spanish, but also to Portuguese. And so you can download it and preferably also read it. I hope that you can find it inspiring. And so I will talk later on about CISS, so I will here close my intervention. Thank you very much.
Gracias a Akun Bleming.
Akun Bleming, thank you so much for your presentation. It was a brief presentation about the most important items of your presentation. Next, Deborah Ruiz has the floor to comment the paper. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Social Security Board and our chairman, Mrs. Nigeli Sosa, to extend greetings and offer our congratulations to our host as you celebrate Social Security Week. I thank you for the invitation to make this commentary to analyze and discuss Social Security in the climate change context. As you know, I come from a country, Belize, that ranks 8 out of 167 countries for climate risk. Just imagine how applicable this document is for Belize and many other countries facing similar risks. Beyond the challenges are opportunities, and this meta paper entitled Facing Climate Change, How Can Social Protection and Labor and Employment Measures Support Adaptation and Mitigation? Is just that, an opportunity we seek today in responding to these global risks. The document serves as a purposeful guide in charting the way forward for the formulation of policies for social protection in line with climate changes we are experiencing. It serves a meaningful end for the purpose of transitioning into climate change adaptation to exploit new beneficial opportunities for all, and thus come a step closer to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Through its proposals, though some may be somewhat far-fetched for fledgling economies, these could be tailored in some way to guide us in our intent to consolidate social protection for our population. More and more, the issue of climatic change is a reality that is less and less deniable. Our current age has been categorized as a period of mass ecological change, the so-called Holocene extinction. The World Life Fund alludes to this episode in the human narrative as the sixth mass extinction, driven by human activity to the detriment of our resources and ecosystems. Pope Francis, in his recent social encyclical Laudatum, categorically states that some effects of the climate crisis, such as increase in the global temperature of the oceans, their acidification, and the decrease of oxygen, are irreversible. In terms of exposure and vulnerability, according to parameters established by the World Bank, Belize, as part of the Isthmus of Central America, is the 61st highest exposed country for relative mortality risk from multiple hazards in the world and ranked 8 out of 167 countries as indicated for climate risks. Belize is also vulnerable to hurricanes, storms, and associated flooding, wind damage, and storm surge, especially along its coastal areas. The country's low-lying terrain exacerbates the effects of flooding and sea level rise, and also susceptible to extreme temperature events, such as acute heat waves that we have experienced lately. As the paper in reference states, the underlying reality is that most of those vulnerable to climate change are those who live close to the coast, having fewer resources to withstand the challenges of climate change. The document proves timely in reminding us of the impending climate change and the challenges that confront us. It is a wake-up call to action in response to a pressing global and social issue that has been denied and relativized. In terms of the failure to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement in 2015 COP21 and the call to action in Dubai 2023 COP25, the fact is clear that the outcome to benefit the whole cannot be achieved at the expense of a few. Further, the strength of the document lies in the context of its call for social protection, labor, and employment as a proponent and signatory to ILO conventions and recommendations in line with basic universal human rights. Belize, since its independence in 1982, has gradually advanced towards an inclusive vision of well-being for its population. The independence was 1981. Such an instrument has been its current scheme of social protection and facilitation of the national health insurance through Social Security. As an incipient move towards social protection, particularly aimed at idiopathic risk, there is much value in that challenge to a broader scope for covariance and longer-term benefits. The COVID-19 pandemic, I should say, proved to be an exercise in trying to minimize the covariance shocks on the nation as a whole. Despite our limitations as a young nation, Social Security was able to meet its sickness-related coverage sickness benefit for COVID-19 related claims, $3.2 million to 7,826 insured persons for a total of 83,155 days of incapacity. Piggybacking from our existing administrative network, we paid out on behalf of our government's unemployment relief program, Phase 1, a sum of $34.6 million to 45,000 persons. We utilized 23,000 bank transactions and 13,000 top-up cards and over 8,000 bank cards for our rapid response. Being prone to hurricanes and flooding, Belize has in place a fairly efficient disaster response system operated through our National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, and its branching management networking that has proven useful in managing covariant crises. A salient recommendation in the paper worth highlighting is the transformative call as the vision for social protection over short-term provisions, which can end up being short-term band-aid solution to the structural scenarios of poverty and vulnerability. Indeed, the transformative function proves to be the challenge in this call for integral social action and subsequent change. The requisites for such are well taken, viz. The need for dialogue involving the state and civil society, including organic and church-based movements within the communal setting, the need for horizontal and vertical expansion that comes in taking responsibility for increased social protection, measures for climate change adaptation, resilience, and disaster risk reduction. It ends up being a matter for the whole village and its leaders to take ownership of these endeavors and a commitment to move with one heart and one mind. The model that is presented in the latter part of the document underscores the need to expand on and transform our insular views on social protection. It presents elements that could prove relevant when revisiting our own scheme of social protection in setting in place effective mechanisms for outreach, being fluid to change, establishing contingency funding for building ecological resilience, and in charting the way ahead towards a green transition. The call to a green transition is the decisive element, I believe, in this model of prevention and transformation. It calls for economic reform in reference to energy subsidies to make room for additional fiscal space designed for employment incentives, development projects, and microcredit programs. The promotion of green jobs through though yet incipient in small economies like ours, becomes part of the overriding challenge towards a change in a culture of consumption and waste. Indeed, as the document states, it is a move that encompasses economic, social, and environmental objectives, which can only be made possible through changes in human attitudes and behaviors at all levels in society. In this regard, the bar could be too high to attain, or we may risk losing ourselves in outlandish over the rainbow proposals, which can end up being shells, lest we forget that transformation rests upon the individual at the communal level. The success of integral social efforts, more than on policy, rests more on qualitative rather than quantitative results, namely the need to realize that there are no lasting changes without cultural changes, without a maturing of lifestyles and convictions within societies, and that there are no cultural changes without personal changes. I therefore propose to equate the project of a transformational eco-social policy to an integral model in shaping human attitudes and lifestyles in genuinely caring for one another as stewards of our environment. It is integral in that it calls to task the citizenry and its leaders to take ownership of that purpose of providing a safety net constructed by all for the benefit of all and everything. I thank you.
Muchas gracias a la señora Débora
Thank you
Ruiz.
so much, Deborah Ruiz, for your comments to the meta paper. And next, we are going to give the floor to Landy Sanchez. Veronica, thank you so much. I am going to share my screen so I can be on time. The comments that I am about to express have the idea to discuss the work that you presented to us. The idea is to think about how this model that you have presented to us in the paper can be adapted to us. It's a very provocative paper regarding the possibilities to integrate climate change into social protection matters. My slides are in English, and I am going to be speaking Spanish. I think that the main contributions of the work that we listened to have to do with highlighting the climate change impacts on people's well-being, particularly of those that are socially vulnerable. It is not doubt that different research all over the world have shown that. So it's no longer a discussion. It's just a matter on how we need to move forward to protect them vis-a-vis this new risk. Social protection is to protect population before several risks in their lives. So how, before this new emerging risk, social protection could mediate and decrease those risks and impacts. And I think this is done clearly in this paper. Besides stating clearly how climate risk should be included and how this should be one of the main purposes for social protection today. And what they are showing us along this text is that we need to move forward in that direction, because there are already some policies all over the world that define how to incorporate this. Yes, of course, we still have some way to go, but in terms on how social protections and policies to promote employment can contribute currently in this time to deal with the most immediate impacts of climate change, but also in the long term, how they can help us to contribute to have capabilities to um, reduce the effects of climate change and GHG. In global terms, I think that these are the main messages that this paper is presenting to us. So, along these components of the text, he is presenting to us how we can deal with this, with that, and how this has been done in different parts of the world. And this is what I am going to do. I am going to focus on some of the ideas to discuss what are the possibilities or the difficulties that these subject matters bring about. So, what does it entail to incorporate climate risk in social protection discussions? Well, first, we need to see how we are going to include concerns about climate change in social policies, because until now they have been separated greatly. We have policies of climate change that are in the environmental field. They have a different set of actors, and they have few discussions with social policies. So all the protection measures have been in a concern about different risks, and they haven't discussed among them. So the main concern is first to understand how to talk together among the main stakeholders that are very different, that have been working independently, how to convince them to get together. And this is not an easy challenge, but it is true that many of the commitments that national governments are making regarding climate change requires to rethink social policies, specifically those that have to do with social protection in every country. There's no way for these two agendas not to meet. But what we need to convey to the community that designs policies for social protection have to do with the nature of climate risk, their magnitude, and their main characteristic, that is uncertainty. One of the main issues that appears with climate change matters have to do with the multiplicity of risk and how they are articulated. If we see a change in temperature, we are going to have a change in the level of humidity, the possibility to have a drought, but it also is going to have an impact in where it's going to happen, where we are going to have events of extreme precipitation. Heat waves are changing as well. So you see a multiplicity of events that are occurring in different populations. So the magnitude, the interconnection of events makes even more complicated how we are going to design a policy that is going to protect different populations at the same time in different places in face of different events that require different solutions. So one thing is the dimension, the magnitude of the events, and uncertainty, not about not knowing what is going to happen, but the likelihoods are changing. If before we were expecting to have a drought every 5 years in certain region due to the trends of climate, because those trends are being modified now. Now it's possible for those changes or droughts to be present every 2 years in one area, or in another's every 9 years. So how programs are going to be ready to face that? So they need to be more flexible to respond to this uncertainty, where and how they are going to be presented. The next slide, please. So the CUNE is presenting to us new analytical frameworks, new works to design social policies that will allow us to understand this in a better way. And he is analyzing two frames that have to do with designing social policies that are sensible to climate change matters, and then to protect them. And they have to be adaptive because before a climate event, they need to respond fast to these incidents, providing services and outreaching the target populations and having capabilities to respond fast before these multiple demand that social policies can face in a certain moment. Next. The dilemma that we have when we design programs has to do with the type of programs that we need to be designing. For example, if the impact of climate change is not the same in the territory, and we know that, then if we see the first line of this table, what are the areas where we are going to have an impact? For example, drought in Mexico today. We have an extension that has been extended where we see increasingly more drought. So we need to ask ourselves, do we have social programs that are going to be relevant for impacted areas? The higher the coverage, the higher the likelihood that they are going to be present in the areas. Then what is the operational capabilities of those programs? Do they have the capabilities to outreach those populations? And if you go down the line, do they have capabilities to outreach the most vulnerable populations? Not everyone is vulnerable at the same time. For example, agricultural works without irrigation that are located in certain areas with higher levels of temperature, low precipitation, they are going to be more vulnerable. So within these populations that I am covering, can I identify which are more vulnerable for drought? And then can I outreach the housings that are being more affected? Because one thing is the potentially affected and the ones that are really affected. Can I send them the necessary help that they need during these operations? And then one thing is to provide them with effective programs. And another thing is how much I am helping them to build capabilities to respond to droughts in the long term. My social program is doing that. If we have a parallel with other social programs, how much this represent like an unemployment insurance, or if this is an active program where I am going to give other skills, training, so in the future they can reinsert in the labor work if the sector where he used to work disappears. So it's the same logistics. How do we build skills for the future? I'm running out of time. So on one hand, we have an issue. How can we make actionable these social programs so they can be practical regarding climate change? And the third item that I would like to mention is that in the text, they are mentioning there is a stronger emphasis on money transfers. Yes, it is mentioned. They are mentioning other type of actions, but they are mainly talking about monetary transfer in crisis times. Especially in crisis times, what it is used the most, especially in the field of disaster attention, are transfer of goods and services. So we need to have a mixed logic, a money transfer, and oftentimes they need goods and services in a crisis. Let's assume a hurricane that strike over a city that had no market, Otis, for example. Money transfer is not useful because there's no market, there are no things to buy. So it needs to be flexible. with the type of transfer that you have to make. So you need to expand the type of supplies that you are going to give. And it has to be a differentiated supply according to the population. An example of a study that we made to protect women and children, and specific vulnerabilities are different. For example, for mother and child care in droughts, it's necessary because there is a serious impact on food and nutrition. So we need to prevent the increase of mother deaths and also to decrease the violence against girls. So how we are going to outreach certain populations that face specific risk during these times associated to specific crises. So it's not the same to address flooding than to address a drought or another type of crisis. I don't want to disencourage you, but we need to think about specific policies that we need to define. And we need to be flexible with our program, so so they can respond to different scenarios that climate change is bringing about. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Landy Sanchez, for your discussion. I think that every intervention has been very interesting. We need to see if there are more comments, if we have some feedback in Zoom. While we review that, let me tell you that we have time for a round of reactions to the comments that the panelists made. So if we don't have yet the questions, I am going to give the floor to Kun so he can answer back to these comments.
If you have questions later on, you can always send me an email or Veronica, and I'll get back to you. And also, if you have interesting cases, please do. Yes. Well, I'm going to tell you about Saussures activities. So Saussure is a facility financed by the European Commission, like I said, and so implemented by Expertise France, Spain's FIAP, and Belgium's Enable, and Belinkostock, which I represent. So Team Belgium, as we call it, is responsible for the coordination of the knowledge development part of Saussure Plus. So, like I said, we have a lot of demand. So, yes. So, sorry. Okay. So Saussure is demand driven. So partners in the 155 partner countries of the EU can submit proposals to Saussure for assistance in the domain of social protection and employment policies. And so that is also a good way to see what is really moving around in the world. So because it is demand driven, we see the points of interest where people are really investing in reforms. And so in that sense, these activities of Saussure, the 600 activities that we have implemented so far, are a good idea, give a good overview of what is actually going around in these 155 partner countries. So that's why the European Commission wanted to valorize this knowledge, the knowledge generated by all these activities, and to generate it and to valorize it in a way that is accessible to experts and policymakers in these 155 partner countries, so that they can be inspired by these activities and also have a good idea of what works and what doesn't. And so the meta paper that I drafted on climate change fitted within that framework. We didn't have many activities on climate change itself. So we had we adapted a more broader tour de horizon to get an idea of what is really going around in policy making in the context of climate change. But at next month, we will make available a meta paper on people with a disability. So the subject is the access to the labor market and to social protection for people with a disability. And there we have many, many actions and activities by Saussure that can be of interest. And it's the meta paper is a really good, give a really good overview of interesting policies for this specific target group. And so it will also be translated to Spanish and Portuguese, so that you can, as of next month, you can also take a look at that meta report. But there are other subjects in the pipeline. There is also a meta paper being prepared on informal work, which will be available early June. We have implemented lots of activities on informal work, and so there this meta paper tries to give a good overview of the most interesting cases that we have found, and also we try to valorize the expertise that is generated by these activities. A third subject is, fourth subject better, is decent work. So that's also a meta paper that will be made available probably this summer on the policies that help to achieve decent working conditions for all the workers in the different partner countries. So we have lots of activities on that as well. And then I am personally also drafting a meta paper on the access of mothers to the labor market. This paper will be available by the end of June. And in that meta paper, I try to address really the important challenge of how to reconcile both the female labor market participation and the development of family care policies. And in the end, also to inspire policymakers in different partner countries. And I try to group it in different geographical areas. And so, but it's also discussing an important subject of facilitating the choice among mothers and among women to participate in the labor market, because of course, I don't have to share that with, underline that, but of course, women represent an important group. And so the human capital of women is quite crucial for our economies. And in some countries of the world, that is maybe a little bit less recognized than in other countries. And so this facilitating this free choice of women to combine raising a family and to participate in the labor market is very important. And so we have to provide decent access to labor market, childcare provision, social protection for policies that really facilitate families with children. So I think that's really an important form of social investment in society, but also in our economy. So that is the subject that I'm working on at the moment. And I hope to finalize it by the end of May, and then so that we can share it with you by the end of June. So these are the meta reports. But of course, you're all free to contact us at Saussure to formulate proposals for where you request expertise from the European member states. It's of course always in a dialogue. We really try to work together with you. You have lots of expertise yourself, and it's quite of a dialogue to see where we can make the best of the shared experiences that we have to address policy developments in your country. And so we have a staff in Brussels that will be happy to assist you with your proposals. And hopefully then we can work together also in the new activities in Central America and Latin America. So that is really, I think, of interest of everybody here. And so I think, well, please do visit the website of Saussure. It is available in Spanish as well and in Portuguese. So you find lots of information about our activities on the website. You find also knowledge development products. Besides the meta papers, we also have e-learnings. And so you find much more interesting information there on that Saussure website. So thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias por esta panorama.
Thank you for this oversight of the work that Socio Plus is doing across different topics that are related to employment. And with this meta paper that we just presented and commented on. Now we will have Deborah Rees, who just raised her hand on Zoom. Can we give her the floor, please?
Thank you. Con, as a follow-up to your presentation, I was just wondering in terms of the what you have seen, a lot of the interventions that you cited in the paper were mostly in terms of the government side contributing. But have you come across examples where the social insurance programs are able to fund some of these interventions? I know we are limited by legislation in terms of the type of programs that we can cover, but is there any options that we can explore to integrate that, or do we go through the public mechanisms in terms of making requests for funding considerations? Or that is my question in terms of the what you have seen on the ground.
Well, social insurance funds and social insurance mutual and so on play an important role within the context of social protection. And I think also like we have an in the context of contingency planning for disaster relief and climate change, I think it will be very wise of policymakers to consult these people working for the social insurance funds and the mutual, because of course they have a lot of experience of policies on the ground. And so their expertise is really valuable in this contingency planning. They themselves, of course, there are many ways where you can also, I think it's important to evaluate what climate change means to you, specifically in that sector where you are working. And so, of course, you have this function within the broader context of, for instance, in context of disaster relief or other, but you can also do, like, for instance, if you're thinking about deliveries of payments of benefits, you see that, for instance, in Japan, they made planifications to make sure that people can still really receive benefits, even if their region is affected by a climate disaster or an earthquake. So they have thought about how to provide their services and their benefits during a situation related to a climate-related disaster. So these are things that you can think about. If you are managing funds and you are managing the investment of funds, there as well you can play a role. And then, for instance, within the context of mitigation, so decarbonizing, you can also try to invest more in sectors of the economy that have a less carbon imprint, and so that you can start thinking about greening your investments as a fund. So that can also be an important contribution that you can make. But it depends really on, in the sector, what are you working on. But it starts first with the reflection and do the exercise and see where you can play a role within the context of climate change.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Muchas gracias. Abrimos.
Thank you very much. And now we have the space open for the Q&A for those in person. Also, I would like... Oh, sorry. I'd like to comment that just as Socioplus has done, we've been talking about the work that we have done as well from the CISS perspective regarding disaster management with Social Security focus. It is not gratuitous that we have Deborah Ruiz. She's the executive director of the Social Security Board of Belize. We've been working on workshops that members have requested to the conference. In these workshops, we are able to show this perspective of what could be the alternatives to articulate, just as Landy Sanchez was mentioning, between social protection institutions and those other institutions who have experience in risk management. We've had truly enriching experiences, like in the case of Belize, where we have limited knowledge on how they plan within the strategic planning the financial details to face emergency situations. Just as in the case of Belize, we've had experience, really new experiences. For instance, in Dominican Republic, we have one representative from Dominican Republic who actually shared with us how, from the contributive and non-contributive social security aspects, they tackled the COVID-19 pandemic and how they managed to increase the coverage to those who are affected due to different circumstances. Also, we have seen that there is this difficulty to achieve dialogue, but we have gained momentum to create this dialogue between management systems and social security systems. And there is a challenge to bring to the table all members of social protection institutions from the non-contributive and contributive side of things. It has been a major challenge to see that the dialogue hasn't happened, but due to COVID-19, regardless of the regime, there was an answer. So it is worth noting this advancement and efforts that the CISS has been performing. And with no further ado and no more questions, I have nothing to say but thank you to our members of the panel. And I would like to remind you that this is an open space for dialogue, and you are welcome to the conversations that we'll have on the future for this and other topics related to social protection. Thank you very much.